professionals, researchers, academicians, an opportunity to brainstorm, to have new ideas on urban issues that can lead to positive transformation. Being the first of its kind in Africa, the Architectural Association of Kenya, AK, with support of the International Union of Architects, UIA, International Federation of Landscape Architects, IFRA, and International Society of City and Regional Planners, ISOCAP, is hosting this third virtual Urban Thinkers Campus, or UTC, which started on Monday, 16th November, and it's going to end today. So today we have a very brief session where we'll have, of course, the summary from the previous 2 days and the results of the urban labs, which I'm going to present. And then thereafter, we are going to go into a plenary session, which will be moderated by our immediate past president, Emma Minoyo. We are going to open up for plenary and reactions. Then we'll have the call for actions and closing remarks. So it's a half day affair. It was supposed to end at 1 o'clock. So allow me just to give you the main objectives of the campus and the summary of the discussions that we had the last 2 days, so that we can move into the last day.
I think we've lost time.
Okay, let's just give us some minutes to reconnect.
I'm sorry you lost me. I'll pick it again by just giving you an overview of what we are doing for the Urban Thinkers Campus and the summaries of the 2-day discussion. So as I was saying, this is an initiative of the UN Habitat, and the Architectural Association of Kenya has partnered for this Urban Thinkers Campus with the International Union of Architects, UIA, International Federation of Landscape Architects, IFRA, International Society of City and Regional Planners, ISOCAP. So it's been a 3-day affair where we started on Monday, and we are ending it today, of course, with a call to action. And the main objectives of this campus, which is tailored around the theme of designing a multi-hazard resilient city, is one, establishing an understanding of the challenges of sustainable and resilient urban development, analyzing the steering mechanisms and instruments of urban resilience, and thirdly, developing appropriate strategies and measures necessary for achieving urban resilience, especially in third world countries. And our case study, we were looking at the coastal region of Kenya with specific interest in Mombasa, Kwale, Lamu, and Kilifi. So for the discussions that we've had a lot of engagements on urban resilience, asking ourselves exactly what is urban resilience, what is sustainability. And yesterday we were really triggered by this thought of, are we still continuing to use the word sustainability to say that we want things as they are to stay. And this is especially with the current situation which we are facing of the COVID-19, where we have had people of talking of the new normal, of wanting to go back to the normal. And we are asking ourselves whether sustainability is retaining the things as they are for our future, or is really going back and questioning if we want things to stay as they are, or we need to make some changes right here and now. We also summarize some of the several components that we felt should be part of a resilient city. And we felt for a city to be termed as resilient, it should be having components to do with economy, governance, environment, and society. And we actually had this discussion yesterday and said we need to think of creating an index of measuring sustainability based on these 4 components. And this would be a very interesting thing if we can be able to develop, so that we can actually measure the index of sustainability in our cities, especially in developing countries. And we asked ourselves, why can't we do that as a model in Kenya and have it as something that can be copied by other developing countries in Africa? We also say that this resilient city, and especially for our theme, which we are looking at, a multi-hazard resilient city, we have to go beyond planning for physical hazards and also incorporate aspects of social, emotional, and even mental hazards that people face. And this was confirmed by Professor Omenya, who said it is all about humans and how we take care of the human being as a whole, understand his struggles, build on his innovation, and stop imposing our measures or our expertise on these people and policing the people. We also had a very good discussion around housing. And the discussion was, are we confusing housing with houses, with the structure? Because housing is more than just providing the structure where this human being resides. It's also about providing quality infrastructure services, conducive environment, public spaces, and basically looking at housing as an overall component that is required for a human being, with proper lighting, ventilation, that will promote good health and a feel-good feeling. And this is very important for mental health. George introduced to us the 3 S's yesterday. He talked of social construct, the socio-psychic, and the socio-orientation. And the key message here was for us not to forget the underprivileged, who we force our social norms on, but they're not privileged enough or in a level position enough to belong and to adjust to all the new norms that we want to impose on them. We also asked ourselves through this discussion how we can cultivate the culture of owning the city. And this is very important because we see people living and residing in the city, but really not carrying it as a home. And you will hear them refer to their rural home as their home, as a place they want to invest more, as a place they want to take care of. But the city is somewhere they come to exploit resources and run away because they don't feel they belong in the city. And it is until the time that we cultivate this feeling of belonging in the city that we can have a good social psychic to work with and work with these people to make a city as a place to live and to also call home. So the key message here was we really have to ask ourselves, of course, who we are planning for, who we are planning with, who we are designing for, and asking ourselves where we don't have these institutions, especially in remote areas, how can we put forward all these new ideas, all these new innovations, all these new prototypes that we are talking about, how do we get them implemented on the ground, especially in remote areas? And the key message here was the idea of having like champions, having that local chief empowering them so that they can also be able to transfer the knowledge and the new skills that we are sharing on such kind of platforms right into the remote areas. We also had a very good discussion on rivers and the people. The issues of flooding, of course, came in very significantly. We had a presentation from KDI on the initiatives that they are doing in Kibera. And one of the successes they have had is the use of percolating materials to allow for water to infiltrate back into the ground using, of course, new experimental slabs, which are now for water perforation, paving slabs, having footbridges, and of course, investing also in other social amenities such as schools. And an example was given of the Anwa Primary School, which also KDI partnered with the AAK to transform the school. We had a very good engagement with the Deputy Director of Physical Planning from Tana River. And Planner Yungu brought to our attention just the amount of resources which annually go to mitigating disasters, dealing with disasters. And he gave us a figure of approximately 2 billion used annually just on the Tana Delta to deal with the flooding menace or the challenges. And we were asking ourselves how we can tap into these resources, not for them to react to the disaster when it happens, but to create resilient projects and livelihoods that would withstand such challenges of flooding in the Tana Delta. And we talked of the idea of corridor planning because from the discussion, we realized flooding is actually triggered by activities which are happening upstream. We talk of using new tools, new technologies such as GIS to map up the flood-prone areas and integrate this right into the spatial plans at the county level and integrate them also in other plans and work with other shareholders and stakeholders to see how best they can put their resources in having resilient projects in the Tana Delta. And the idea here was we have to stop what they were terming as disaster tourism. And disaster tourism is for us as expertise, journalists, expatriates, coming to see the disasters that are happening, taking very nice photos, giving very good reports of what is happening, but not taking an action of preventing future disasters in these areas. We had a very good discussion also on how we can retain young talent, and especially the call to counties to really hire and bring on board young professionals who are very well, of course, equipped with new skills, with new ideas, the use of new softwares, but these people usually have no expertise. So the call for mentorship is again being emphasized. And I know this is an area where our AAK president is very passionate about. We as the professionals who are more experienced, we have to see how we mentor the young people so that they can take these really intensive duties at the counties or any other areas to contribute significantly into our cause. We also had a very good engagement with Paul, who represented really what is happening in the low income areas. And one of the key issues he brought to their attention was the issue of the forced evictions. Of course, this is an area which is very sensitive in terms of how you balance between forced evictions, compensations, and finding a mediation ground really of having to settle these people or having to solve their land issues and supporting them through the transitions. He also brought a very good important point of supporting our fisheries. We for long looked at this sector and neglected it when we are planning, when we are designing, but this is an important sector for food security and for promoting economic self-reliance, especially in the coastal region. We agreed from the discussion that indeed we need to look at urban regeneration in Mombasa City and other coastal cities, and also incorporate now the aspects of urban resilience when we are talking about urban regeneration projects. We also had a conclusion that we really have to be truthful to ourselves as professionals. We have to be accountable, and we have to look at how we actually communicate to the residents in a truthful, transparent manner on the impacts of any projects that we are proposing, especially for major projects, whether they're infrastructure projects, so that they can see how best to shape their lives and their livelihoods along these significant projects. So that is basically the summary from the discussions yesterday. Allow me just to quickly take you through the results of the urban labs. We had 2 urban labs, which were breakout sessions on the first day, where we had smaller groups really engaging and bringing forth new ideas and new suggestions and proposals. So I will start with the Urban Lab 1, which was chaired by Planner David Jenga and supported by Landscape Caroline Wanza. And here they looked at the effects of the cities, and they came with results that cities are heterogeneous and we should consider them as a full urban ecology, as it were. They summarized the key challenges, which of course were cross-cutting through the 2 groups. The issue of water security, mangrove destruction in the coastal region, the issue of flooding, poverty, urbanization and urban sprawl, the issue of tourism and sustainability, just that balance of tourism and promoting sustainable practices, socio-cultural factors, institutional paralysis, human psychology, and resource conflicts. And they came up with just 3 key areas of where they could tap into the existing mechanisms. And this was tapping into the different stakeholders by really seeing how they can coordinate the efforts of all these stakeholders. Through social innovation, of course, social innovation as we know it is just tapping on the local knowledge, the know-how, the use of local resources and materials. And this NAP came up with key strategies, and among them was, of course, exploring indigenous knowledge, that is just social innovation, interdisciplinary approach, really looking at urban resilience as a multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary key issue that we should approach as professionals, policymakers, and even bringing in the local community and building on local existing urban policies, standards, and laws. I think that one appreciation is that we as a country have a lot of policies, we have a lot of laws, we have a lot of institutions, but how do we streamline these and tap into them to bring out urban resilience? The other resolution they had on the proposal is to invest on education and training. And this is by involving also research institutions and really investing in new concepts and new ideas. And of course, the use of readily available resources using social and physical infrastructure which is available. And of course, creating awareness of the local communities and a possible call for attitude change and perspectives. So that is basically in a nutshell what was the result of Urban Lab 1. Allow me to quickly share with you the results and the findings of Urban Lab 2, which was led by Dr. Planner Musimi Mbathi and architect planner Franklin Mwango. And the challenges again here was for them, they came up with the issue of communication, and this is really not having linkages between the policymakers, the professionals, the experts, and the local people. That gap that is there, we have the knowledge as professionals, the decision makers have their knowledge and their tools, but there's usually a gap between these people, the decision makers, the policy makers, the professionals, and the local mwananchi on the ground. The issue of attitude, which again is cross-cutting from the two groups. And the issue of enforcement, again, this goes to the points that we had from even Lab 1, where they pointed out we have the policies, we have the laws, but we don't implement. And I remember from the discussion, because I was part of this team, one of us really was very even passionate and asking us why we are now in this day and era for people walking around with power saws. You have seen them around the streets with their power saws ready to cut trees. Why should we allow for such kind of practices in this day and era? It should be clearly, because we have the policies on how you should get an approval and authorization of even cutting trees, but we still have these people walking around with power saws ready to be engaged to cut the next tree. It should be criminalized. It should be something that is highly seen as a crime, and these people should be deterred from getting such kind of easy, small task of cutting trees down. And then of course, there is no clear linkages of livelihood or the economic benefit for the people versus conservation. And the notion here is, I'm sure when you push a new agenda on the ground, they will ask you, but tutakula nini? Where are we going to get our livelihood from? So this is really one very key challenge that we have to ask ourselves, even as we come up with proposals as this urban lab. The key proposals they had were very having champions, and this could be individuals, corporates, NGOs, CBOs, and local youth groups who will now be properly trained on resilience and equipped to transfer the knowledge and the skills to the common mwananchi, just to build on the local skills, the knowledge, the materials, which should also be coming up with the buildings and structures which are easy and cheap to maintain. They also came up with this notion of having the youth in resilience. And the youth in resilience is basically creating and really promoting resilience as a cool thing to do as a youth, tapping into the innovation of these young people. And we have seen a lot of new innovation, a lot of new ideas, especially during this COVID-19 situation, where we've had a lot of youth bringing in new, very good projects and ideas. And the other key proposal was promoting what they were calling the green government. And the idea here is to have a European-like-minded government, which is advancing green agenda, green sustainable resilient agenda, have professionals join political positions. I know this is a discussion we've had so many times as professionals, academicians. We have to stop complaining and take key political positions. Create livelihoods as we push for resilience. Again, this came up also from Lab 1, ideas around urban agriculture, sustainable fishing, and really having projects that have both components of sustainability, resilience, and economic inclusion. And the last but not bit is education, entrenching right from primary education, aspects of resilience, aspect of sustainability, having active studios in universities on resilient projects, and funding green innovation and research at the universities. So that is the summaries that we had from day 1 and 2 and the results of Lab 1 and 2. And I will quickly welcome a few reactions from the floor before we move to the plenary session. If you have any comments, any question, anything you feel you should add, please feel free to engage as we transition to the plenary session. It seems either I talked too fast, or I was not clear, or I was very clear, or you agreed with everything I said. So allow me then to welcome Architect Emma Minoyo, our immediate past president, and our first female president at the Architectural Association of Kenya, to take us to the next session, which is a panel discussion. Karibu, Emma.
Thank you so much, Juliet, and thank you for that wonderful summary that you've given us of what's the goings on have been for the last couple of days. And it's exciting that we're having these conversations, and as you said, really today being the last day, seeing how we can move from talking and move to action. So wonderful to be here today, wonderful to have a great panel with us today. It's full of doctors except for myself and Christopher. So Christopher, we're among doctors. Huh? We're quite humbled. But even as we just transition into this, I'd just love for people in the chat just to say, what do they think resilience and city planning is? That's our topic this morning. Resilient city planning. And if there's anything that has taught us about resilience, it's COVID. So just share in the chat. What do you think what does that entail in a city such as Nairobi, Mombasa? What would it take to make our cities resilient in terms of city planning? Just share with us as we transition into this panel. And we have a great panel, as I'd said, and I'll just take a moment to introduce them as you're sharing your thoughts. I'll start with Christopher, and maybe he will wave. I hope he's here. He can wave and just. Christopher, are you on the call? Yes, great. Thank you very much, Christopher Waithaka. He's the founder and member and secretary of Com Green Solutions that was established in 2007, and he was born in Korogosho, and he regards himself as a reformist, and who uses his past life as a member of a gang that engaged in criminal activities to preach a narrative of behavioral change among the youth in informal settlements. He is presently involved in environmental activities such as landscaping and beautification and rehabilitation of the Nairobi River and greening of the riparian land. He spends his time mentoring youth to avoid a life of crime and is a supporter of the upcoming generation in his whole community. He's proud of his current role and as spokesman of Com Green Solutions, which continues to transform their lives and improve the environment as it did. I think Chris really just envisions something that or encompasses something that a lot of us in the built environment talk about how the environment and how being engaged in the environment can really impact behavior, and how people are even proud of the community. I think Com Green won an award last year, Public Space Network, and you've just done phenomenal work in terms of a community that is engaged and is able to improve their environment. So resilience really from ground up rather than talking too much, like people who are rolling up their sleeves and getting the work done. Yeah. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us this morning. Next on our panel is Dr. Edwin Oyaro Ondieki. He's a senior lecturer at the Department of Architecture and Building Science in the University of Nairobi, and he practices architecture with Strass Architects. He's served as an advisory capacity at NITA and KEBS, and also previously served as a member of the task force on the construction industry policy representing AAK. Prior to joining University of Nairobi, he worked with Ministry of Public Works. He has taught at KIBIT, which is a Kenya Institute of Highways and Building Technology, between 1994 and 2003. He studied architecture at University of Nairobi, has studied architecture at University of Auckland and also the School of Architecture in Norway. His specialty is in housing, urban design, and technology. And might I add, he was my teacher in third year studio, teaching me housing and the like. So really very, very nice to be on the same panel with a lot of my teachers here. So thank you so much, Karibu, Dr. Oyaro, and we're looking forward to a wonderful discussion this morning.
Thank you, Emma, and I'm happy to be around. Thank you so much. Okay,
the next doctor, it's a panel of doctors, as I said. We've got Dr. June Mwajuma, who is the Chief Officer, Department of Lands, Housing and Physical Planning and Urban Development at Mombasa County, and she served in this role since July 2019. Previously, she was Chief Officer, Department of Environment, Natural Resources. She also holds a graduate degree of Botany and Zoology from KU, and has a graduate degrees in water microbiology from the same university. She specializes in genetic mapping of water microbiology along Mombasa's waterline, and has also done extensive research in morphology of dams and issues of human-wildlife conflict. Prior to joining Mombasa County, Dr. Mwajuma worked as a lecturer at the Technical University of Mombasa and a quality control officer at Mumias Sugar. So karibu sana, Dr. Mwajuma. Thank you. Last but not least, certainly, is Dr. Susan Kibwe, who is a senior lecturer at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. She has taught for many years there, and might I add, she has also taught me and has served as external examiner for Makerere University in Uganda, Arthur University in Tanzania, and Namibia, at the Polytechnic of Namibia. She has completed a post-occupancy evaluation research, both in formal and in informal low-cost housing initiatives in Nairobi. So we really have a panel of people who understand from the ground up, from Chris to Dr. Oyaro, to Dr. Susan, to Dr. Mwajuma, who really understand housing in its whole different aspects of it, from government, local government perspective, from people who are actually doing things on the ground, to people who have studied it from a more academic perspective. Yeah. She's a member of the UIA and was part of the Education Commission of that body. She's the first female member of the College of Fellows of the AAK, and she was appointed this in June 2019. And she also has served for many, many years on BORAX, which is a board of registration of architects and conservators, and leading up the education board within that sector, within BORAX. So, Dr. Susan Kibwe, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you.
Okay. Great. I think today our conversation is just really about resilience in city planning, and I'd love to start with Christopher, who has a very, very good story about what they've been able to do in terms of waterfront regeneration along the Korogosho slums and along the Nairobi River, and managed to reclaim a dump site along the Nairobi River into a people's park, a children's playground, and a daycare facility. This is just a wonderful example of what people can do when they put their mind to it. So I'd love, Christopher, just to introduce Com Green Solutions, how it started, why it started, and what have you been able to achieve so far, and what can you teach us about, what can you tell us, really, about resilience and how people can rise to make their cities work for them. Maybe, and I hope you'll be able to, show us a few pictures of what you've been able to do. Thank you, Christopher. Karibu sana. Are you on mute, Chris? You may need to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
And we can continue sharing on the chat and reacting even as Christopher shares his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Rita. And I'm Christopher, I'm a member of COM Green Solutions. And COM Green is a group of reformed youths who are engaged in back life in crime. But they decided to change. Nobody told them to change. Through the construction of the bridge that connects to Dandora, it was being constructed by the Islam Upgrading. We were well welcomed by the community elders to come and look after the materials as securities, as since we didn't have any skill to construct the bridge or to fix the metals. So after looking after the materials and the bridge was well constructed, we came up with an idea so that we can fall back into crime, and we have seen that we can earn something. We can earn something, can do work and earn something instead of shedding blood or robbing the residents. After the bridge construction was done, we came up with an idea of transforming our hiding places. It was one of the hiding places where we used to use different kinds of drugs. We used to meet with different types of crime in different locations. But after coming with the idea of giving back to the community, since we have done a lot of bad things before, we saw that it's good to have a mini park, yeah, so that we may not fall back into the life of crime. Though it was a challenge, it was a big challenge. Calling to the crime officers and together with the chief, so we had to organize a dialogue, community dialogue, which made us to create a good relationship together, the people living in the slum of Korogocho. So after there, we were so inspired, and other youths were so inspired too, and they wanted to join us. We started like a 15 members, but the number started to rise since we were just volunteering for the community. From there, we were registered. We were registered through Public Safety Network and the Changing Faces competition, and it was so proud that we were the winners, defeating 114 teams. Since it was not. We had a lot of challenges sustaining the park and make it to look nice and green and fixing up the gabions. So we came up with an idea where we want also to earn something while we are sustaining the park, of which it was not done. We were aiming even to have like a Wi-Fi down there. We saw that a lot of community people are coming to rest, kids are coming to spend party time, and which we were so interested. And we also come up with the idea of securing a kids-friendly space along the river, and it was great since we also aimed that we don't want the kids who are coming up in our community to go through the life that we used to live. So we started like a mentorship. First, we started to install the playing equipment where we can capture all the kids' attention in our community, and it's doing great. It's doing great since the number of kids, those who used to go and play along the Dutch River, have really decreased. Even the diseases have really decreased. From there, we saw that how can we sustain even ourselves? So we really had to engage ourselves in urban farming activity, where when we finish our daily activity of volunteering, we can also have something to eat or something to put on our table as members. Since it was a challenge, it was a big challenge. Even the youths have come to work and they're asking where the payment. So there's where the national government saw that the work that we were doing, and some of our members, since the number increased to 15 to 70, it was an achievement community. And also we were now employed as casuals to the county government, which brought a good relationship also with the other communities. The youth might like to do what we were doing. So after there, we also had to do like a piloting to engage other youth groups who are living along the riparian, so much they may be able to do the same thing that you are doing instead of being idle. So it takes us a process and a challenge of even providing materials of like maybe lunch, which can bring them together. But we had to work on a report and maybe try to look out for some people who can maybe assist us. So far we had a small fund where we had now come and we bought some uniform, which made us to look great in community. And it made the whole people living in the slum understand now the reason why we are caring and nurturing the upcoming generations. Through these projects, the community have been able to give us a project where we aim to have like a school of environment, like baby care, something like that. And through the playing equipments, we have had some playing equipments, and we want to even generate more income activity. Since we want things that the projects that are sustainable. And together with what you are doing, or something that we have tried to do with the money that we won through the Changing Places competition, we bought a tank, we bought a car wash machine, of which now members can come and work, and we'll save a little amount for the group. And also for those who are coming out from jail, so there is a challenge when you say you want to be mentored through creativity, but we should put a task, we should put action. So through this project, we also aim to have a stone crusher machine. Since this is a dangerous work, as you can see, people say there's a dangerous work, we can get infections. Some members, ladies that have been so infected, most of them, but in good luck, no one has ever admitted to the hospital. So that's why you can see most of our post ones, we're just requesting for safety gears. The safety gear, since the Nairobi River is really toxic, and it's a challenge removing stones which we used to add gabions. So I thank all those who are on board, and maybe in case of any questions, maybe ask. Apart from restoring the Michuki Park, we are well invited by DG from NEMA, Dr. Mumo, and together with the Ministry of Environment, Mr. Greco Tobiko, we were well invited at the Michuki Park and together at City Park. So far, we have really shown our efforts. Though sometimes it was a challenge even having funding a fair to make sure all the members have arrived safely. So it was a bit challenge. So we had to use the money that we were saving, since we are doing a table banking. So we used to use the money to get some transport, so that we can go and make sure that the government has shown the efforts that we are having, and see the challenges, and if they can help us overcome the challenges. Because our main aim is to, we know we can't live the river, but at least we have come with a small example where we know now that the government know, or other organizations, because we know that organization care much than the government, because the government is a long process, even requesting for playing equipment or the safety gears. But so far, we're really trying our best. We're really trying to transform the other place, which is not so far from the park, like approximately 20 meters. And we really want to create another recreational park. After the community have now known the benefits and interest of staying in a clean and healthy environment. For any question, maybe you are free to ask. All are free to ask. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christopher. That's just a wonderful, wonderful story that actually shows resilience through one project that you did, inspired so many other people to rise up, take ownership of their community, change how they perceive their community. There's financial resilience that came out of this project. There's sustenance in terms of urban farming. It's just really a project that just inspires many of us. So thank you so much for for your presentation and for doing what you're doing. I think it shows and inspires all of us to see that we are able to do something. And they say that the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. I'm sure people used to think you were crazy when they were seeing you clearing garbage and saying, our vision here is that children will be playing, but look what you've done and how much more if we all scaled and we all did something. So thank you so much. I'd just like everybody just in the reaction tab to give them a round of applause. We'll be having a Q&A at the end, and just some reactions, please. And thank you so much, Christopher. And yeah, and I think all of us must be challenged by the work that ComGreen have been able to do, and they've ended up, being featured worldwide for something that that just started as a simple idea. So I think thank you for challenging us and inspiring us this morning. That resilience also starts with you. Resilience is in the small things and small projects that can start small and grow to be something that impacts people in so many ways. So thank you so much, Christopher. And just speaking of that and moving to Dr. Oyaro, and Dr. Oyaro, you've done a lot of studies in tenement housing and low income communities, and this word resilience, it's one word I don't know whether to say and to ask whether it's a very elitist thing to be saying, how does it seem meaningless when we have so many? I think we've been talking about sustainability, now we've moved to the word resilience. What in your opinion is urban resilience? Just looking at what Christopher and ComGreen have been able to do, and looking at the work you've been able to study. I know you've done a lot of work in pipeline. What would resilience mean for someone living in those conditions? What would it mean for them? Thank you, Dr. Edwin.
Thank you so much, Emma, for giving me this opportunity. I should also thank the Architectural Association for remembering me from time to time to be able to share. The word urban resilience, obviously, what coined from it's an ecological concept, and I think we all know that. Obviously, like the word sustainable as sustainability, sustainable has been a difficult word for many years, of course, and it's not until later years that people started to really give it meaning by attaching certain constants or certain attributes to it. Now, the word resilience, obviously, it's an important word that is used in ecological circles a lot and in biological systems. But it's a word that we can make meaningful if we all endeavor to do that, so that we can get it from elitist seminars and workshops and classrooms and lecture theaters, from master's theses and all that, because this is what kind of people are now writing about. How do we make this word meaningful to everybody so that then we can start to act, because basically resilience means that, you got to survive, or you got to adapt and progress after you've gotten a shock, or after some unexpected, event has happened. For example, the coronavirus. How are we managing the coronavirus? What we are doing now is managing the coronavirus, but we did not prepare for it. What it means by resilience is that we are supposed to anticipate that something will happen. And some anticipations are obvious, that we are going to have a drought. We will have a drought. I mean, we have droughts. People die of hunger. Why is it that we don't plan for that? Why is it that we run short of maize in this country? And yet we know, it's not going to rain, or we'll have short rains. What does it mean? What might it mean, for example, in our settlements in Nairobi, if we got an earthquake? And we don't know when we'll get an earthquake, by the way, but one day it will come, it happens. And we've seen this across the world. I know we may not be living on those plates, but I'm told, the tectonic plates, they live to vary as an issue. You don't know when it will happen. Of course, we have issues like floods, and we know floods will happen. Even in Nairobi, occasionally there is so much rain and we have issues. So I think we can put meaning to what's like resilience if we start to institutionalize it. We start to have it within the curriculum of our schools, from primary school, to tell our children that we need, how do we prepare for, for the eventualities of, for example, flooding and the drought, which is really common in this country. How do we prepare for that? And I know we do this all the time within planning policies and etc. But I think we need to start to say that, we intentionally and consciously, start to plan for it and to say, we are doing this because we are preparing, for any eventual shock that may happen. So resilience is not a word that we cannot give meaning to. We can actually give meaning to resilience, but we need, as actors, who are within the academic, within the academic area, to try and give it meaning, so that it doesn't have too many meanings. Because right now, anything is resilience, I can tell you. I mean, anything, and you should see what students are writing for their master's theses. Resilience is kind of like everything, just like, sustainability became like everything again. I think we need to package it in a manner that it is simple to understand. We need to give it certain indicators, and to tell people straight away, when we do the following, we are trying to respond to the concepts of resilience. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oyaro. And maybe just from your perspective also, I just want to throw in something in the work you've done on tenement housing. Could you shed some light on that, even as you talk about resilience? I know you've talked about the aspect of drought and floods, and the way Kenyans always, we wonder, we know when to predict. We can actually predict when there'll be floods, we can predict when there'll be drought, but we are always caught unawares. How does that same lack of forethought, in a sense, play out also in the circumstances that we find ourselves in informal settlements and tenement housing? What is the problem that we have not been able to build up resilience as a city?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again, Emma. If I may just come to informal settlements. One of the characteristics, of course, of informal settlements, and why we use the word informal, is that it is not planned. Anything that is planned, that is following laws and all that, will not be called informal. It's called informal because it is the establishments or the developments that are built or developed outside of planning regulations. We all appreciate that planning regulations follow the principles actually of resilience. Planning follows principles of resilience. They may not be saying that outright, but those are the principles, that how can we develop an organized environment that will survive? How can we keep good health? How can we provide for our people, and etc., etc. So settlements, for example, in tenement settlements, which is really a big thing now in Nairobi, is that obviously when we look at the construction of those settlements, beginning with materials, going into the technologies are poor technologies, or rather technologies that they're using are not following the standards of technology that we anticipate to use as we were taught in schools, or as is good practice. When we look at issues like the congestion that we have there, and the issues that come about because of congestion, such as the spread of diseases Like now, the pandemic is a very serious issue in the tenement settlement because of crowding. We have issues of pediatric rickets. People don't have enough sunlight, and etc. All these conditions actually do not make informal settlements, places of resilience, places that can regenerate. In fact, I just wonder and pray that we don't have like an earthquake, because if we did have an earthquake, I am sure we most likely just going to forget about settlements, because we may not go in there to remove anybody. You can imagine the concrete and etc. So we pray that these things will happen, because this will be a disaster. So informal settlements, by the word informality, means that these are places that cannot be resilient in case of a shock, particularly an earthquake and a pandemic like now we're having coronavirus. I know people sometimes say, coronavirus is everywhere and etc. But when you look at the manner in which people live in informal settlements, the closeness, the crowding, then you appreciate that it will be very difficult for us to be able to manage when we have such a crisis. The other one, just to finish, is the whole aspect of infrastructure. You see, in an informal settlement, what it means is that there is no good infrastructure, for sure. They don't have enough water services, they don't have proper drainage, the roads are very poor. These are all conditions that make for disasters. These are conditions that make for disasters. And so we need to handle informality in a manner that tackle it actually and try as much as we can to eliminate informality. We can actually put formality into informality if we mean it as a country. The challenge we are having, again, I think we can talk about this later on, is that we have been unable as a country to have the political goodwill to actually tackle these problems, because these problems are solvable if we have the political goodwill. It's happened elsewhere in other cities where the mayors, where the governments were strict. I mean, it's happening even in Rwanda. Why can't it happen in Kenya? So these are the issues, Emma. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think you've brought in some very important angle, and I'm glad we have people also in leadership on the conversation and on tuned in, as it were, because when you bring in the angle of political goodwill, it's a truth, that we all need to work from all aspects, from private sector, from people on the ground and citizens themselves, but also, whether we like it or not, government is there to enforce, to ensure whatever we do in terms of planning for resilience, that it's executed. There's only so much we can do as individuals. And I'd just like to bring in Dr. Mwajuma at this point, because your chief, you've been chief officer. Mombasa is doing very, very interesting things, and you're in charge of Department of Lands, Housing and Physical Planning. We've seen wonderful projects. I think for many years we were waiting for Mama Ngina waterfront to be redone, and finally it was redone. I think every architect, every planner, that was their dream, and I can tell you the numerous number of projects that were done at the university final year that involved the Mama Ngina waterfront, and to see it being actualized is a wonderful thing. The dump site that used to be at the entrance and gateway to Mombasa, and that cleanup of that dump site, again, something that everybody used to say, this is supposed to be our tourist city, our resort city, as it were. How can this be right at the entrance of a city that's supposed to be attracting people to come and see it for its, for its beauty? So it's wonderful to see some of those projects that have actually been, come to fruition and been done. But there's been some criticism, around some of those projects, as always. And we've been, personally, just in terms of the number of urban improvement projects that we've seen intended to improve the city's resilience, have been wonderful. But nevertheless, concerns have been raised on the sustainability and resilience of such projects, especially due to a perceived non-inclusion of the locals in that regard, and stakeholders in the identification and prioritization of these urban solutions. What is your take on these concerns that that have been put forward? Yes, Dr. Mwajuma.
Thank you, Emma. Very interesting observations you've made. I am actually glad to report that when the Kibarani dump site was cleared, I was at that time Chief Officer Environment. So all the blame and glory landed at my doorstep. And there are times when you have to rise beyond the noise and just get the right thing done. It may not be perfect, but it is the solution that may work at that particular time. Now, I will say this from the perspective of local government. I've had a privilege to work in academia and then transit to local government. The environment and the landscape is totally different. The drivers on the ground are totally different. But one of the things that is clear and is becoming a norm over time is the whole idea of public participation, the institutionalization of the 2010 Constitution. It has a chapter 10 there, an article 10 that requires us to engage in public participation. And as much as is possible, that is done, because it is not only a constitutional requirement, but we're in a landscape where people are very knowledgeable nowadays and they will ask questions. What I will say from my few years of experience in government is that the people that could offer concrete criticism do not attend the public participations. We call for public participation, we put it in the papers, we organize the social halls, but you'll be amazed that you will find the very usual political hecklers who are attending these meetings. People who would come and sit down and say, no, if we put this embankment here, these are likely to be the effects, are too busy. They will not turn up for those meetings. I am throwing back the ball to us, even on this forum. Like, what are we doing in terms of raising our voices when projects are proposed? How many of us even attend an EIA open session to give our comments, unless the project directly, probably we are part of the proponents of the project. So public participation has been institutionalized. We are working very hard in Mombasa to make it a reality. Because of what we have had to go through. We have actually been in a process of developing a framework for public engagement in project design and implementation with the assistance of an organization known as WIOMSA, which supports cities on the Indian Ocean coast. As we sit now, we are actually in the process of developing a social lab. Some of us call it a social lab, some an urban lab, where we can bring in citizens to see different aspects of what is happening within the city and be able to take them through what our expectations are and allow them to also give their views. But the reality is marrying the expected, then getting to the ground and rolling it out is quite a challenge. You mentioned politics, Emma, and I will tell you for sure it plays a very significant role. Juliet in opening indicated that professionals should try to move into governance. I think that is very important, because when we have people in governance who have no idea of the basis of a particular decision, they will oppose everything or support it based on what they gain from it politically. So Mombasa has had its share because of the politics. I know you mentioned it in housing, and probably I may give more information at that point, but it is something we are working with, taking baby steps, but moving towards it. Let me use the Kibarani as a case in point. We brought in professionals, I being one of them, we said we must close Kibarani. This subject has been there for long. We have to close this. When we sat with international professionals, the budget for closing Kibarani came to almost 60 billion. Mombasa has a development budget of 2 billion per year. That was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. We said, now this is where we put all the science on the side and look at local and practical solutions. We may not be able to excavate all of this, but let's begin by compacting it and covering it with a layer of soil and allow for natural decomposition to take place. What we did there is not the best case scenario, but definitely each and every one of you appreciates the difference. And it did not cost us 60 billion. So it is time that we Kenyans also, we begin thinking, what are our local solutions? We would want to import very high-tech technology from out there, but can we afford it? What can we do? Do we leave the situation to continue to move from better to worse, or do we take the baby steps to make an improvement? For Mama Ngina Waterfront, that is a project that was backed by national government. It was backed at the county, but implemented by national government. Currently, we are working on the Pirates. We call it Jomo Kenyatta Beach, hoping to transform it to an even better waterfront than Mama Ngina, and allow every mwananchi to enjoy that luxury. In terms of how resilient this is, I believe at the time of conception of the ideas, I believe we are using professional architects. We are involving environmental experts in designing all of these. And I believe that at the end of it all, we get to look at how does the land and water interface interact. We ask ourselves, we know that we are just at the ocean and the sea levels are rising. We are bound to be affected by that. So some of these developments are actually put in place with that in mind. What can we do? Do we put some kind of modified dike that will still maintain the coral in place and allow us to have a good place where people can still enjoy the breeze from the ocean and still keep the waterfront safe? So it is a myriad of ideas that we are putting together. The non-motorized transport, walkways all over the city. We are greening, not a very easy place to green, but we are putting the palm trees, different kinds of palm trees on different streets, hoping to make Mombasa greener, reduce our carbon footprint, make it a cooler place because it's naturally very hot. So all of this put together, and innovations from young people like Christopher, whom we also have locally, we believe all of it put together will make Mombasa a better place. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mwajuma. And I think you've said a few things there, challenging all of us to show up also. You know, we are the ones who move away from Twitter sphere and get to the ground and get involved in some of these projects. And I think the challenge there, you said, has any of us been involved in an EIA participation where we were not the architects? I think that's an interesting poll. If we put here, we'd get interesting answers. So, but maybe just even throwing to you that sometimes also when we do have public participation, it might be good to also stratify the kind of participation and where to go to get some certain type of feedback. So sometimes mixing everything in one pot may not work. And sometimes if you actually approach like an association like AAK, we have Mombasa chapter, you could actually have a nice small baraza where all the professionals come and they're able to give you that feedback. We find that that has worked for us many times when government needs our input. When you have specific targeted feedback mechanisms, you get better turn-up. So thanks for that challenge. I'll just move on even as we talk about climate. We've talked about the waterfront, and climate change is also a big thing. Even when we are talking, we've talked about the lake, the Rift Valley lakes, and Dr. Oyaro alluded to that. Climate change is a big thing in terms of the shocks that we're going to get. I think we're at that point in our in the world where really the worst, unless we do something, the worst is still yet to come. And just moving to Dr. Kipua and see, with the work you've done in terms of informal settlements, they're at risk really. And we see that even in Nairobi, when we do have floods, a lot of these informal settlements are on riparian land, and they face a lot of, the people who live, the inhabitants are really affected when we do have, the long rains. In terms of upgrading these informal settlements, is that a possibility? And is it possible to mitigate the climate risks, but also provide multiple socioeconomic and development benefits simultaneously? Just like seeing what they're able to do in terms of the riparian land, that in itself provides a buffer, but also provides a recreational, zone for those in the informal settlements. In your opinion, how can upgrading informal settlements contribute to climate resilience and inclusive development based on your research and your experience in informal settlements?
Thank you very much, Emma. I hope you can all hear me. And I'm very
yes, but you're low. Maybe you could,
hear me.
Or maybe just speak up. We can hear you, but maybe you may just have to speak up a little bit.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, for AAK for inviting me, and also for starting this Urban Thinkers Campus, because I think it's very important that these big decisions are made, discussions keep going. Now, Emma, I just want to start from a broader perspective. The fact that yesterday, Professor Umenya talked about humans, and also on the first day, Carrie Duncan also talked about making people-centered design, in terms of even urban design or whatever we're doing, to always think that at the back of all that, we're talking about people. So for me, what is very important is that the magnitude of people in those informal settlements is always really high, because it is, we're told it's about 70%. And if Nairobi has 5 million people, for example, we're talking about 3.5 million people. And of course, the risks are many. I mean, Dr. Oyero talked about the resilience, and a lot of the resilience problems are with the water bodies, the rivers, and also how we contaminate them with maybe the sewers or whatever. So those are so important, because even if you try to draw clean water from that, it's a problem. So there's a really big threat to the natural ecosystems that are already existing around where people live. And the hazards are definitely enormous. And it's showing that they're not even able to bounce back. If you call resilience bouncing back, they're not able to bounce back. So for me, I was thinking that sustainability has to be taken at a bigger context, because right now what is happening is that people like Christopher and people like KDI that we saw yesterday, NGOs, civilian groups and organizations are the ones coming to sort out the problem, are the ones rushing, maybe say like firefighting, like coming to firefight the situation, because it's really serious, because it's a threat to them, especially the people in the informal settlements. They really feel it, and they welcome people who can come and support them. But for me, I really want to go back to the bigger question of governance, in terms of how do we handle it, because the problem is bigger than we can imagine, because we're talking about slums which are spreading around the whole of Nairobi, for example, and major water bodies, being contaminated, and not only the water pollution, but also the air pollution and all that. So in order to talk about sustainability in a better way, we have to think about how do we manage these ecosystems? How do we clean them up? Who do we blame? Who is the custodian of all these things? You're talking about resilience. Who are we going to talk to? We cannot keep running to Christopher. Christopher can only do so much. KDI can only do so much. In that stretch at Kibera, they keep doing little bit. It's like, I'm calling it firefighting. So who checks the levels of pollutants? Who is the custodian of these areas? Who safeguards the people who are around? This laissez-faire attitude is quite serious right now as we speak. So I'm looking at the bigger picture, So, why do we always have to keep the community groups, the NGOs, running to it? And somebody asked, I think Mr. Kabuye asked on the chat about, how do we monitor this sustainability thing? And I just want to just give us a little bit of a background history about all this sustainability agenda. It started with, Local Agenda 21, Rio 2022. Then we had the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. And now we have the SDGs 2015. And all these have been adopted by governments. The governments have adopted these agendas. They've taken them on board. They've signed for them. I don't know, I hope you're getting where I'm coming from. I'm trying to look at the broader picture. So what I did, because I was quite curious, okay, these people, they signed for all these agreements, UN, this, World Bank, all these kind of things. And even for climate change, there was COP21, COP22. So then I was just wondering, just like what Mr. Kaboya was asking, is there any checklist? Is there any way of monitoring? How has the implementation of those agreements been? So I went to check whether there's such documents, and then I found out that the custodian of those sustainability agendas is the Ministry of what? Devolution and Planning. And I checked that Ministry of Devolution and Planning to see what do they have. And what I have seen is basically statistics, just statistics. We need 500,000 houses in 5 years for, SDG 11. I don't know, maternal health care has been taken care of. It's like ticking the box of statistics, ticking the box of statistics. So what is happening is that we are not having all the things that we've been talking about the last 2-3 days up to today about, cities. We're talking about cities because SDG 11 talks about sustainable cities and communities. It's more than just cities, and like Professor Omenya said, it's not only houses. So we're talking about something at a macro level. So I really think that we have to, it's a very good discussion we started about this urban campus. I think this is very important because it's probably a good way to start also engaging the government. Maybe the government is not really aware of how to go about it, because even if we do it in small sections at a time, we can begin to achieve a certain amount of resilience, which will touch not only on the slums and the informal settlements, but will then touch on everybody in the cities, because what we're talking about is livability. Because when we have planning, we want planning to improve our lives so that I'm able to walk in the city, with a lot of security. I feel secure. I'm able to cycle around if I want to cycle. It also came up in the AAK convention that I'm able to cycle, continuously in the city. I'm able to have a park where I can sit. This is, it's for the common good. This land is for everybody. Yeah, but it is the good sections of the land are only for some people. So the informal people, settlements always are relegated, just take care of yourselves. What can we do more? And they are doing a lot. Because even the project I was working on Kambimoto, the people themselves, again, are the ones who are, moving things, are the ones who are creating their own resilience in that little bubble that they have. But if you look at what is happening, it's not enough. It's not enough. So my biggest proposal would be to see how we can get the government moving, even in those agreements, and if possible, maybe like Planner Rita is saying that we get people on board, or we have some specific roles in the planning department for planners, or for architects, or people who understand those professionals. We designate certain roles for them, especially in terms of moving the agenda forward. So for me, I'd like to look at it in that broader way, because of all this lack of resilience, there are a lot of stressors. For in the city, and even for the people, as we're talking about mental illness and all those kind of things. So it's very important also, even as we discuss this, as we begin this campus, this Urban Thinkers Campus, to start thinking how we can engage them in order to start moving, in a better way, and also taking the ones along the way together. And I'm not saying that we will not have participation, because of course, even as we have maybe the government on board and following the agreements and the implementation plan that they have, because they're talking about 2030, and in fact our vision, Kenya Vision 2030, is actually all about sustainability, because what is entrenched in that Kenya Vision 2030 is this SDGs. Really, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, we only have 10 more years to implement them. Yeah, so what can we do? Maybe this is a very good opportunity for us to think and see, what can we do? We really appreciate what Chris is doing, what people are doing in the, I said KDI, I was very impressed with their project yesterday, what they presented on Kibera. And many other people are doing a lot of things. And it's because they know it is a problem and they want to solve it. But it is not enough. How can we do a little bit more, especially because we know that it has been adopted by a government? We should also even be able to interrogate the budget. How much budget is there for this? It's very important for us because even our health is affected. Maybe the health budget increases because we're having all these terrible kind of environments to live in. The livability is poor. So we need to think that at least that's what I was thinking. Perhaps we could think about it from those broader terms, and maybe to see whether there's a proper roadmap, implementation plan, you know, with targets, yeah, and certain indicators. You know, and now we only have 10 more years, really. 10 years is nothing, yeah? So what can we achieve in these 10 years that are remaining in this whole big sustainability agenda that has been changed, that has been, the name keeps changing, but it's the same thing, whether it's local agenda or MDG or SDG, it's been the same thing all through. So maybe I just want to challenge ourselves as professionals to see what can we do? How can we take it a little bit further than we're doing? Do we need to have some other kind of lobby groups or something that can maybe assist us, or to have more champions? I mean, Michuki was a champion, really, he was a champion. But you see, it was because he was a champion at that time, but we cannot just be waiting for a champion. There has to be something that is designated in terms of taking care again of that human, that person, to make our planning of our cities people-centered. Yeah. So Emma, I just want to stop there. I don't know whether I've really answered your question, but
No. You brought in a very important aspect. Who is the custodian of resilience?
yes.
Who is the custodian of resilience? Who's the one who can, you know, push and drive this? And that's very important, that we've signed up to all these wonderful things. But is it a checklist? You know, sort of like the ease of doing business sometimes. This is just a checklist, but on vitu qua ground, you know, we're signing all these big things and talking these big words about resilience, but vitu qua ground, how are they? You know, and that's very important. Who is supposed to be driving the resilience agenda? Who is supposed to be safeguarding the people? Who's the custodian for people-centered planned city? You know, it is, and I'd love to even just bring in Dr. Yaro here for, you know, the second round of questions. You know, I know you talked about it. You brought that aspect of political goodwill. Dr. Kibwe has mentioned about really custodian of resilience is government, because they are the people. They are the ones who speak for everybody, not only the haves and have not. And that's sort of been forgotten in a sense. So, Dr. Yaro, you know, with this whole new phenomenon of tenement housing gaining popularity, what is the solution? What you talked about, the tie-in between resilience and planning, which has always been there. Planning is about, in itself, is about planning for a better future, therefore a resilient future. Where do we start, even as Kenyans, with this urban sprawl that we are facing? Like, it's such a big problem. If we were to decide to resolve the problem that is tenement housing, what do you think is, how do we grapple with that in a resilient manner? Who should start this? How do we create that momentum, Dr. Oyaro? Just short, because we're also running out of time. So maybe just in a few words, who can save us? Who's the Messiah?
Thank you, Emma, once again. It's the issue of housing, particularly low-income housing, is an issue I think about. You know, an issue people ask me questions. How do we solve this? And there are really no simple questions. What I want to say is that the low-income sector has got a lot of money, by the way. The people that invest there are extremely wealthy people who invest in, low-income housing. And low-income housing, the kind of resources invested and the kind of people that invest there and the benefits of it. I just want to remind maybe the audience just to understand that when you invest in a tenement, you make your money back in 8 years. Now, there is no kind of housing you can invest in this country that gives you a return on investment in 8 years. If you do a formal house that is approved through the government systems and all that, I'm telling you, it will take 14 years. And then if you build in Runda, maybe 20 years plus. Now, this is the difference because there's a lot of money there. Now, the challenge that we are having is how can we guide this money as a system so that we can then invest in housing, in proper housing. You know, the cost of a house, really, indeed, when you look at the cost of materials and sometimes even the cost of labor, it's the same. If you're building in Kireleshwa and you're building in Pipeline or you're building in you know, in all these other settlements in Kayore, it's about the same. I mean, the concrete is the same and all that. But the thing is that where can we get the political will to direct this money in the private sector so that we can still invest in housing and then, but invest in housing that has got a win-win situation where we are saying that the private developer is going to gain, maybe not to the level at which he gains by developing illegal structures, but he's probably going to get return on investment for 10 years, you know, and this can happen through policies. Now, there were government efforts. You remember Michuki tried to incentivize the private sector to put money in housing, but the incentive he gave them was not appealing at all because he was talking about 200 houses and something like that. Nobody actually picked it up at all. The thing is, there was no consultation between the private sector and the government. I think it's important that we have people, and I don't know where we'll get these people from, because it looks like we have these ideas, but we do not have the people that can actually make this change, who can actually engage the private sector and possibly give them land or organize systems around land, give them some level of tax incentives so that they can start investing in what we call adequate housing, as is envisioned in our constitution, by the way. Adequate housing. What we have in informal settlements, in tenements, is inadequate housing. People are living in one room, they're sharing toilets, very many households, and generally children have no place to play. You can't breathe in there. They put on electricity 24/7, and those are not resilient environments. Those are just death traps, waiting to happen. And we fear for this disaster. I also have been proposing that one other way is that because return on investment is just 7-8 years, it's a short time. These guys have been around. Some of these tenements have been here for the last 20 years, 15 years, and so on. One of the other strategies that should happen is that we can round up these areas and call them special planned areas. There's a provision within the Fiscal Planning Act for that. You can lock them in, and say, look, in these areas, we're not going to develop anymore. These houses will remain like this. We're going to continue having people. We might request or we might demand for some kind of retrofitting to bring in more air and light so that we can have some normalcy there, a little normalcy, but stop this development and try to organize a situation where government plays a greater role in providing infrastructure, because what we need actually is infrastructure. Then you can now then demand and say, since I've given you infrastructure, in return, you are going to do this. Yeah, let's also as government just accept that, look, we may have to play a little bit of a role that would promote a bit of the private interest to some level and, assist them to profit. But as we assist them to profit, we assist our people to live in better environments. Because as Susan has put it, this environment is creating stresses. These stresses don't make for a resilient city. These stresses bring in diseases, psychological diseases. Sometimes we don't even know about them. Maybe all of us, we are sick. and not necessarily because we don't live in there, but because we are operating with people that live in there, who are stressing you in your offices, who are stressing you in your houses, who are stressing you on the roadside, who are stressing you as you walk around. We start to become a sick city, and that is not sustainable. Because you see, 60 to 70% of our people live in those kind of environments. That's a big magnitude of people that can actually drive the rest of us who may not live in those environments crazy. So we must start to do something. And as I've said, we need political goodwill. We have ideas within academia, and professionals have ideas. What we need is really kind of a revolution in our political sphere. But you see, architects, planners, and all that never go into politics. We leave to politics to funny people. You know, all the time we ask, politics is a dirty game. That dirty game is not a bad game. It's a place where we should be so that we start to bring about change. If you've looked around the world, we've had great people that have changed their cities, who are actually architects, who are actually planners. But when we allow people, funny people, to become governors, to become, members of parliament and all that, their interest is different. You pass around these lands and other areas. You ask yourself, where are we having all city structures on the roadside? Do you know who allows structures in the roadside? They are politicians. They have gangs of people who actually sell space, public space. And I ask, who allows this? The councils let these things happen. The chiefs allow this to happen. You know why? Because they get rent from these fellows at the end of every month. These are multi-million businesses, ladies and gentlemen, and we need really to react to this. I think Emma will be coming back probably to discuss more. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And just to recognize the presence of Dr. Ayub Macharia from the Ministry of Environment. I know he's listening in, and thank you so much for those insights, Dr. Edwin Oyaro. I just want to throw this back to, even as we just look at winding down and taking one last round of questions and parting shots. And Christopher, in terms of the improving livelihoods, because really your initiative was about environment and how environment can improve livelihoods. You shared some of your challenges, but even as Dr. Oyaro is talking about political goodwill, were you able to be supported by government, and how can we, from your experience, how can we glean and see how partnerships between government and private sector and private initiatives like yours can have an impact? Maybe you did share your challenges, but I just want to see from a perspective of partnerships, how was government able to support you, both at local level or even national? Maybe you can share some insights, and then also just give us one parting shot, even as we're looking at closing the session. Christopher, over to you.
Okay, thank you once again. Thank you. And from the challenges, the government haven't worked anything. I can say they have not worked anything. They have not worked to improve our activity or daily activity. Since they saw we are touching the water without the protective gears, and which is very dangerous. And also we had requested even for the stone crusher machine, which might employ a big number of youths who are out of crime, but they failed to do so. So I can say they were just only employing us a day like 500 shillings a day while we were working at Michuki Park. And the activity that we are doing right back at Korogocho, expanding the park, we are just volunteering. Back at the city park, we were being paid only 650, 150 it was for transport. So we have not seen any effort from the government. We have not seen any effort so far.
Okay, maybe just, that's something to note, and maybe something we can pick up and look at how how we get government involved. But even as you just also, as we're closing, maybe do you have any parting shot as we're looking to closing? A parting shot, something you'd like to tell everybody who's on the call?
Okay, thank you once again. I think that it's a great time that we've come together and to work to improve our planet and as a slum as a whole. And all are welcome. Those people who are willing, all members who are willing that they might come and join on hand. so that we might bring back the lost quality of Nairobi River. They are welcome. If people are out there, they have trees, they have protected. Yes, even if there are 2 or 3 from different organizations, we really appreciate. And also to add on that, we need a training. We need a lot of training on part of the environment, and also life skill training, because most of our members they don't have any skills. Others do. They understand that they're environmentalists, and I think from there we need to be educated. That's all that I can just request for young people, to be totally educated. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Christopher, and keep on doing the wonderful work you're doing. And I'm sure we'll see how to partner, even as an association, with you. So I'd also just like to swing it back to Dr. June Mwajuma, and we were talking about tenement housing, and there've been great efforts by County of Mombasa in terms of the affordable housing space. And you've faced a bit of perceived resistance also from people who already were living in some of those estates that you wanted to upgrade or sort of gentrify and improve on. Maybe just looking forward, do you think the county can? There's been a criticism of don't build for, but build with community. Just also relating to the other question I had. So looking forward, do you think the county can build with communities? And what options do you think your department can pursue to achieve an inclusive, affordable housing agenda execution, as it were? I think Dr. Oyaro has talked about how you can already engage with people who already have the money, but may not be, investing it necessarily in a manner that produces the kind of housing we want. What strategies do you have in place, and how have you tried to think outside the box in this regard?
Thank you, Architect. I believe the Mombasa Affordable Housing Project in totality embraced the very tenets that Dr. Oyaro has just mentioned. The county was not sinking in a single shilling in all of these projects. We were able to harness the power of public-private participation and getting investors from the private sector. Whether or not the tenants were in support of the project is something of question. I think where we have had the opposition is in one estate, and out of the 447 tenants, we have 382 who consented to the project. I believe that is a very large percentage. For those who opposed and who are struggling, actually, even as I sit here, I'm in court in another virtual meeting over the same, which is the estate redevelopment. So I'm shuttling between the two. To be very sincere, the motive is political. It is not really about housing as such. Why? In developing these new housing models, we have involved the tenants and the public at large, because we are looking at a scenario where we are hoping to have more houses than what we have. In a place where we have 447, we are hoping to have 1,900, and we're also hoping to have around 200 shopping and commercial openings. So, and we all have a picture of our old Kanjo estates. They had more space, and people would be comfortable to still own a larger space on the island at the expense of having some people literally building in the mangrove forest. So I think that the politics is the biggest challenge. But in terms of embracing, I will tell you for free, many of the tenants, actually, even as we talk now, many of the tenants have moved out and are ready to come back in 2 years to occupy a much more, an upgraded settlement than it is now, because it is all about making it better. Right now, they do not have sufficient mechanisms of managing sewage. This was a settlement that was built 50 years ago. Whatever capacities were put there are not even able to sustain the current population as we stand. But in terms of strategies moving forward, besides using our already existing estates, we have also set aside some green sites, 2 green sites outside the city that are not occupied as yet, to build new houses from scratch. So we are hoping that will make a difference. We still insist that whoever investor we get, the whole process of design, as the architects do the designing, they come and share it with the people. The tenants are able to give their comments, say we would prefer this, we would prefer that, and include it in the whole aspect of city planning. So basically, we have no solution outside using private investors because our normal budget wouldn't carry that. But as far as inclusivity is concerned, to the best of my knowledge, we have tried. And as I said before, Architect Emma, when we call out, I like your suggestion about probably stratified participations, and that is what we are working on with the social lab. Because if you look at how the constitution is structured, we are supposed to call the public to come. And who is the public? The public is you and I. So you and I have to make an effort to appear and give our comments and even educate wananchi. Because we are looking at a scenario where you have been renting, a house has passed on generation to generation, but it is still a county house. Here is a situation where you are able to make it a home. Somebody mentioned of having cities having a sense of belonging, even if we are living in a city. And these are the things we want to create. But still, our biggest challenge becomes the politics of the land, the politics of 2022. And we put aside development just for all of that. It is, I think for me, the call is professionals arise. Professionals arise, get involved.
Thank you. Professionals arise. Yeah, that's a very good point that you've repeated severally. I just, last round, like I said to Dr. Susan, you recently did a research and published a book in relation to slum improvements. Are there proposals, even as we've talked about housing and informal settlement and resilience? Are there proposals you think over and above those that have been presented that can help address the challenge of livelihoods reconstruction in slum improvement programs? What were some insights you can share with us on what we can do with a problem that is very, very real, as it were, in Nairobi and Mombasa and other urban centers in Kenya? Dr. Susan?
It's 12 hours.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma. Yes, we did a research, and we found that when people did the houses themselves, the results were very positive in that they were able to provide the spaces that they were required. I mean, they still had a very small space, but because they worked on it according to their needs, they were very happy with it and they were very proud of it. And it is much more different than the tenement houses, because basically what the tenement houses are stone slums. Basically, you just put a slum, but you raise it up for many levels up, which don't have the same quality as what we found the people doing in Kambimoto. So the people there the community there is actually doing some work on the same with the other slums within Huruma area, all the way going towards Mathare. So they themselves are actually replicating some of the houses or the ideas to the next slum, like that. So they're already working on it. I mean, we haven't managed to go back, with all this COVID, we haven't managed to go back and see what they're doing, but they are actually now have become community leaders. And what they have done has become a showcase for the other people in the slums. And also they have seen that the quality of life of these people has really, really improved. And because that they have the sewers already there, they have water lines already there. So they have piped water, they have flushing toilets, And the way they've designed, they've got little pockets of green areas in between. So the quality of life in that upgraded slum by the people themselves is very impressive. Yeah. So it is true that when the government doesn't come on board, the people can do a lot of good work. And if this is the way we need to go, if the government is not going to come and assist us, I think it may be the way to go, because they are becoming resilient communities amongst themselves, and they're very happy about them. And we found that because they were very happy about them, they're proud of them, and they really took good care of them. They take very good care of them. Yeah. And also the people within there, they feel very, very secure in those areas. So going forward, I think this is a way to go forward in terms of involving the people themselves in order to get the results that you want. Because sometimes when you give people something and it's not really what they want, I mean, they're not as happy as when they do it themselves. And then Emma, I want to touch on just one little thing on the issue of poverty. One of the first SDG goal is on poverty. You know, so some of these people who are living in those tenements, it's because they don't have a choice, because of the poverty index is really, really high. And also the aspect of livability, livelihoods is not really taken care of. I mean, they don't have enough to sustain them. So sometimes they do it because they're vulnerable, not because they really want to live in those tenements. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that it is possible. And I'll just, sort of go into a short Q&A even as we wind down. I'm happy to take some questions on the chat, but if one or two people, anyone wants to, say something or contribute to the conversation, if you could just raise your hand, and I'll be able to pick you out, and we, I'll take one or two from the plenary, and then anyone also can post on the chat. I'll pick them out, and we'll close and hand over to the Secretariat, who will take us through the final part of this session. So any questions? Maybe Secretariat can help me to see if there's anyone who's raised their hands. Yes, Mark Wambale. Mark, please, I see you're unmuted. You could ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah,
and just say who you're addressing your question to, please, and introduce yourself.
I'm architect Mark Wambale. I work in Kampala. I'm Ugandan. Sorry, I started late. I was in another meeting, so I may not have got all the participants' names, but I'm very interested in the issue of the informal settlements, upgrading of the tenement houses. In Kampala, we have an interesting challenge of land tenure. You will find that many of the informal settlements, these are squatters. Actually, the people living there are renting, and the owners of the buildings are not the owners of the land. And then we have this interesting law about land ownership, where rights, there are all these multiple rights on the land. And then it becomes very hard to carry out such a project, because first of all, you want to solve the problems of the people living on the land. The person owning the structures is a different person. The owner of the land is a different person, and probably they are interested in freeing their land for investment. I don't know whether you have such a scenario among the projects where you have intervened, or whether any of the participants, the discussants, have ideas on how to navigate such a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'll ask Dr. Oyaro, from the tenement housing perspective, what was the scenario in terms of land ownership and those building? I know it's quite interesting also. You could share your insights, and greetings to everybody who's just tuning in from Kampala. I see several of you, so thank you for tuning in. And I guess this is the silver lining on Corona, that we can have these conversations very easily, and even Dr. June can be in court as she's here with us. So wonderful being. Dr. Oyaro.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Architect Wambare, the scenario Architect Wambare has painted of Uganda is not actually different from the slum scenarios in Kenya. A lot of slum housing is actually owned by what we might call in Kenya, we refer to them as slum lords. We have slumlords in this country. Slums, in fact, most of the houses in slums, I'm not sure the percentage, but I want to say even 95%, the people who live in slums rent housing in slums. And they rent these houses from slumlords, and these fellows have got, you find very many units. They will have 10 units, 20 units, 30, 100, 200 units, and so on. These are the people who actually own. Now, for some reason, a lot of the Kenyan slums are on the riparian, and so this land really is public land. So the owner of the land is the public. And so the slumlords, because they were government officers or they were influential people, they were allocated plots, 10 plots by the local administration sometimes back. And so they build these, wooden or mabati houses. And so they rent these houses. So those places don't belong to them. So one of the greatest challenges we're facing as a country is that how then do you provide for services? Once you do that, you gentrify the area. So if whatever it was costing to rent, a unit, now the price goes up because somehow there's water and there's a good road. So that gentrification then creates a conflict because the people there, once you increase rent by 100 shillings in Kenya or 150 shillings, then they have to shift because they can't afford that. Now that becomes expensive, and therefore you start to have a different demographic come to occupy the area. We really don't have a solution to this problem as it were at the moment. Rather than, at the moment, we really don't have a solution, and I wouldn't try to suggest that we actually have a solution because these places are providing accommodation for our people. And so as long as people are housed, we actually don't have people who are not housed in this country. There are no houses, very few people are houseless. People sleep somewhere. So it's only that the quality of housing is bad. But so just to appreciate that the scenario in Uganda and Kenya is actually the same, and we do not have a solution as it is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oyaro. So maybe the thing is to put more money in people's pockets so they can afford better housing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know whether there's another question. I see one on the chat about what tips can the panelists share to help us build peaceful and resilient cities. Collaborating with ComGreen, who regenerated and rehabilitated Korogosho as a resilient and clean space, was a great lesson in a peaceful city, a secure city, a peaceful city. So what tips, and I don't know which any panelists who would like to just take this kindly do so, what tips can you share that can help build a peaceful and resilient city? What tips, maybe Christopher? Sorry. Yeah.
Emma, can I take
Dr. Oyaro, you were saying something?
Yes, I just wanted to add on that question, and I think Susan can come after that, is that I think the greatest challenge we are facing is that we intervene in informal settlements. There are interventions, and many people are intervening. NGOs are intervening in terms of bringing in, toilets, ablution blocks, and etc. Others are doing lighting. Others are trying to do a bit of drainage and water supply, and also government is also trying to intervene. The problem we are having, and I wish that the AAK and other bodies like us should start to do, is to try to ensure or to try to focus, to bring together the various sectors that are intervening in the slums, so that we all know what everybody is doing, so that we utilize that synergy. Because you can imagine if we all know what everybody is doing and then everybody contributes his part, then we can make a change. But if you are doing toilets here and another guy is doing lighting in another slum, another guy is doing another thing in the other section of the slum, it becomes very difficult for us to be able to actually make a difference. And that's why disjointed efforts are not making a difference. I think we should, as a movement, start to advocate for a multi-sectoral approach to issues, so that we all come together, so that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and then we can be able to move forward, which means we must come up with a framework of bringing everybody on board and working together. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a very good point. And I'd like to tell everybody there's actually something like that under the Kenya Private Sector Alliance called the Nairobi Forum, which I happen to convene, which is exactly what you're saying, that we are all doing our little things, but there's so much there to learn from each other. But sometimes we don't even know what someone is doing in one corner from what even government is doing. So there's an initiative called Nairobi Forum, whose vision is actually that to bring anybody who's doing something about improving Nairobi as a city, coming together and cross-pollinating and learning from each other. So at least in that regard, and also involving associations like AK and others in the built environment would be very, very fundamental to all this. I think I don't see another question. Dr. Kibwe, did you have another remark?
Yes, thank you, Emma. I just wanted to add to that conversation that when people do participate, then they're able to take care of the place better. So the person was asking whether it's peaceful. So it becomes safer, because when you do something yourself, you take care of it. And all the places that have some element of urban regeneration, like I must say what KDI is doing is urban regeneration. What our friend Christopher is doing is some kind of urban regeneration. So because the place is more opened up, it's more accessible, there are more people there, within that vicinity. So it actually becomes a safer place to go. The beauty of urban regeneration, as somebody has also said here in the chat about Medellin, Bogota, Curitiba, where we had professionals like ourselves, working on those cities. Again, the same thing happened. They became very safe cities. Yeah, crime rate went down. Yeah, they were safe. They were peaceful. People started cycling. They started doing more things. So they even became healthier because of all the exercise they were able to do and enjoying their city as they should have. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take two last questions and then just wrap it up. There's one from Boniface and Goluba Kayiso. So Boniface, please ask your question, and we'll take the last one from Kayiso, and then we wrap it up with final remarks and close and hand over to Secretariat. Over. So Boniface, please ask your question.
Thanks, Architect Emma. To Dr. Oyaro, it's true we have politicians, and actually it is a challenge on road reserves. To add on that, we have like places in slums where the government has given them official power. What can we do to enhance on such issues? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Madam. Architect Golova Edward Kaiso from Uganda. IPP Institute of Architects and Uganda. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, please proceed to ask your question and tell us where you're tuning on from this afternoon. Mm-hmm.
I'm in Kampala, Uganda. I'm the outgoing president of East Africa Institute of Architects, which we now handed over to Kenya. It's rotational to Architects Association of Kenya, Architect Florence Nyole. I'm also the IPP for Uganda Society of Architects. Thank you very much for putting this together. I've done a lot to encourage my members to attend. About informal settlement, I'm getting a certain curious part of me saying that, informal, we call them informal, but we need to define informal. Because to them, those are formal. That's what they can afford. We need to define what causes these settlements to keep coming up. And I think they are a necessary reality because of economic issues. Remember that they always have to be near their places of work. They cannot afford to live very far away from their places of work, because the money we pay them is not enough to sustain them if they have to travel long distances. They cannot afford the costs. Remember, guidelines, bylaws, and regulations have a cost to them. Maybe in future we need to research more about the cost of following guidelines. you'll find that the way they do their, like the construction, the designs, they live there. Of course, now like with the corona and the rest, there's a huge risk of infection because they can't social distance and the rest. But in other aspects of their lives, you find that there is a way they manage within what the world has dealt them. We need to study the economics of what causes these settlements, what causes these people to behave the way they behave. My takeaway from this was a statement I had, I think yesterday, when someone mentioned that we need to learn as architects to build with the lower income communities and not to build for them. So that's why a lot of the time we build things which they actually abandon and move on to resettle somewhere and do things the way they think they should be done. We need to study them more, the social and the economic sides, the causative and the behavioral side. Otherwise, thank you very much. Let's have more of this. Asante sana.
Thank you. Karibu. So I think we can, those two questions I'll ask, even all our panelists to sort of touch on them even as we give our closing remarks. I'd like to, I think there's a question from Timiyu directed to Oyaro. So if Dr. Oyaro, you could answer as you're giving your closing remarks, and then we can move on to the others and close. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. Simiyu posed that he did recognize that actually the issue of businesses are along road reserves and etc. I mean, really, I think for him it was really a comment to try to appreciate that the issues that are really happening under the course of politics and the political influence, or rather power, the power play, which is happening around informal not only informal settlement, but even within informal areas in terms of creating slums within road reserves and other parts of movement in the cities, and particularly towards the areas where we have slums. Now, this is obviously happening, and we are all aware of this. Everywhere we drive, we'll be able to find that these are, wherever there's an informal settlement, a few kilometers away from it, you find that the slum wants to extend. And like I said, this is really political, and you find that it's the power brokers that will encourage or that will give out these spaces to the people to construct. I think that's a good observation, and this needs a political will and intervention to push out these people, because it never becomes easy. You have wars, and it's not a joke. Now, just to wind up what I was saying, my discussion also is that I think we as an organization and in this forum, this is a good forum for us as build environment professionals to start to share and to act as advocates to the wider community in whatever capacities we have in school, for those of us who are lecturers and the practitioners, so that at the end of the day, we try to get to those areas of influence where we can start to influence change and particularly policy, because it's through policy and commitment of resources that we can start to change what is happening, what is making our places not safe places to live in or sustainable places. And therefore, then we can actually improve on resilience. So let's move on as practitioners to encourage our politicians and the political class to actually embrace, good living, quality living, because what we need eventually in our cities is quality life, so that we start to enjoy. Our cities, they say in 2050, we're going to have, like in Kenya, we are most likely going to have half of our population in 2050 living in urban areas, not necessarily Nairobi, but elsewhere. Now, this population is very huge. We are going to start to come up with issues like the compact city. We are going to go high-rise, whether we like it or not, because of the value of land. We should now start to come and develop guidelines to start to support this kind of movement, because we are urbanizing, whether we like it or not. We are going to go high-rise, whether we like it or not. So what is going to be our intervention? What are we going to advise government? What influence are we going to have to, planning policy? Because we must change. If we don't change, change will force us to change. So let's not change by force. Let's plan for change and let's guide that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Plan for change. I think that's the takeaway. So maybe Dr. Kibwe, you could attempt an answer to the question posed by Architect Edward Kayiso as you give your final remarks. 1 minute, please. Let's wrap it up so that by 12:30 we are done. Dr. Kibwe.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. I agree with what my colleague is saying about having policies going forward in terms of how to guide those houses that are coming up instead of retrofitting them like what they're doing in Mombasa now and creating more better houses. And my other comment that I really want to make is that I really thank the AAK very much and Habitat and the Town Planners chapter, Juliet. I think this is a conversation that should keep going. The recommendations that have been made, the issues that have been brought up in this seminar the last 3 days have been excellent. And I think we need to keep talking. And then we also need to see how we can get champions amongst us, maybe who we can push, if they don't want to go there, that we can push to this political arena so that we can begin to see the change that we really need to see. So I think I look forward to the next meeting. Yeah, Emma, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you very much. Maybe just final words also from Chris and Dr. June. Christopher, some final parting shots. 1 minute, please. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, maybe from Dr. June. Dr. June, if you just give us your final shot, parting shot, and tell us, what are you taking away from this and what would you like to leave people with? Dr. June? I guess she probably has to go, has had to leave, that she was in court and on this session. So I think with those final remarks from Dr. Kibwe and Dr. Oyaro, I'd just like to thank everybody for being part of this conversation over the last 3 days. It's been wonderful just listening to those conversations, starting with the opening ceremony on Monday and closing with this. So it's really the challenge to us is to continue having the conversations, but to move from conversation to also a lot of action. Action from the summary looks like it's going for political posts so that we get political goodwill to change all this, because at the end of the day, we do realize that the custodians of resilience it is in our leadership. So we have to influence leadership if we are to see any resilience in our city. So maybe that's a parting shot from me, just to thank everybody for being a very vibrant audience and keeping the chats going, and to thank everybody who's joined us from outside Kenya and within Kenya and outside Nairobi. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful session, and I'd like just to hand over back to James at the Secretariat to take us to the next steps, even as we close. Asanteni sana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. If I may just request the Secretariat to turn on my video. So for me, it's just to say I'm very grateful for all the support, for your patience. And even as we come to the end, I would like to invite our president, Architect Mugura Jendu. I see you're in the meeting. if you could just come in to invite Dr. Masharia, who will give us a few remarks from the CS Kiriako Botobiko from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Juliet, for that. I think I just want to take a moment to really appreciate the last 3 days in terms of conversations that we have had. I think we have had such a robust discussion accumulating in this last conversation. And really, I think as professionals, it has given us a lot to think about our role and how we can be more action focused in terms of ensuring that all these great thoughts and deliberations we have actually become something real. So with just that, I want to firstly appreciate all those who have organized, all those who have participated, and then to invite Dr. Ayub Masharia just to make some remarks. He's here on behalf of the CS, Kiriako Tobiko. So Dr. Masharia, we appreciate your presence. Karibu sana, please do make your remarks. Thank you.
You cannot start your video. Okay, thank you for allowing me to stream my video. Good afternoon, participants. My name is Ayub Masharia. I'm studying in for our cabinet secretary, Mr. Kiriako Tobiko, who was invited to attend this forum, and he has a statement that I'll just read through. From my own, I have appreciated the issues. Incidentally, they are also captured in the CS statement, and so I'm happy because of the convergence of ideas between us and what the CS has prepared. Thank you. I'm reading his statement. I'm excited to be a panelist in this forum, and I thank EAK and UN Habitat for organizing it. Our urban areas have grown at an unprecedented rate, especially the county headquarters. After the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and devolution of finances, counties became urban development hotspots. Many new buildings have been erected in county and sub-county urban centers, attracting increased economic activities. A third of Kenya's population of 49 million lives in cities and towns. Every day, thousands of people, especially the youth, join the urban centers, motivated by search for opportunities with hopes of a Kenya's urbanization process faces a challenge of running ahead of planning, sufficient housing, and available jobs. Hence, many urban folks are victims of joblessness, poverty, illness, and vulnerability to natural and man-made disasters. This interferes with the social harmony and security, leading to even greater human and economic costs. A disproportionately high number of those moving into cities and towns are under the age of 25. It is projected that in 20 years, they will form almost 60% of all urban dwellers. The government has prioritized young people, both men and women, at the heart of the quest for national development in an effort to tackle unemployment and underemployment. In this regard, proper planning with the youth in mind has to be employed. The government of Kenya has prioritized housing under the Big Four agenda and has approved housing sector and real estate market incentives that attract the participation of the private sector in the housing delivery process, particularly for low-income earners. The government has a strong focus on delivering improved lives for the urban poor through investment in the Kenya Slum Upgrading Program, aimed at improving lives of an estimated 5.4 million people living and working in our slums and informal settlements. As urbanization continues, there are several challenges that the Ministry of Environment is concerned with and is actively addressing. One of them is waste management and pollution control as a result of increased population and economic growth. Waste management and pollution control is directly proportional to the population and economic growth. Hence, measures are needed to curb waste management and pollution. The ministry has enacted several policies and laws to curb pollution, and this includes Environmental Policy 2014, Environmental Management and Coordination Act of 2015, and its corresponding water quality regulations. The recently developed draft Sustainable Waste Management Policy and Bill 2020 intends to transition waste management from linear to the circular model. The urban population also needs open spaces for recreation and relaxation. The ministry, NMS, and UN Habitat has done mapping for over 800 open spaces in Nairobi. Plans are underway to secure and restore these sites for public use. Availability of fresh water for domestic and industrial use is critical in urban development. The ministry is keen to conserve and promote afforestation in the catchment areas to ensure sustained flow of water. Discharge of untreated effluent water to the environment causes pollution and waterborne diseases. The ministry has enhanced enforcement of Water Quality Regulations 2006 to ensure that urbanization does not increase water pollution. Climate change is also a major challenge with us. With evidence in urban areas of flooding. And this is a major component that should be integrated in planning for urban development. The government also supports finding better ways to manage our rural environments in order to stem disruptive migratory flows to big cities. Our agenda focuses on small villages as much as it does on mega cities, and balance on the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of development is in high consideration. With these few remarks, it is evident that planning and the role of AAK cannot be overemphasized. The architects need to put in place measures to ensure that our people are safe, and environmental considerations are a key consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayubu. That's very good insights from the government. And I'm very happy of the mapping that you're doing for public spaces in conjunction with the UN Habitat. And we are hoping to see more coming from your ministry, because it's very key, even as we talk of sustainability and urban resilience. Asante sana. So at this point, I will go to the call of action, just the main points that we have come from this discussion, to see even as we leave this forum, what we are going home with. And then after that, I'm going to invite Architect Munyanya, who is going to give us the closing remarks. So basically, from the 3 days that we have been together, we've had very good discussions. And I gave a summary, a comprehensive summary in the morning of the main key areas that we discussed and the key proposals that we felt should be carried forward, even as we move forward with this Urban Thinkers Campus. And the theme, again, just to remind maybe whoever is just joining in, The theme was around designing a multi-hazard resilient city. And from the discussions that we had, we agreed we can't go back to normal. That is not an option we have. So we have to ask ourselves how we want to go forward, what's the new normal that we want to create, and how we can come about it. And one of the key areas is, as professionals, especially in the built environment, is the aspect of designing with nature. And here the con was we need to find a balance to develop and plan and design when integrating nature, going back to the basics to curb environmental hazards and other pandemics. And the notion here was nature has a way of facilitating resilience. There was a push for sustainable mobility. And here we are calling for us and the government, we need to push and implement efficient and safe public transportation. More spaces to be allocated and more infrastructure to be done for pedestrians and cyclists to promote sustainable mobility, push for electric vehicles and railway systems, and really push for integrated mixed land uses that would encourage walking and access of services within short distances. On the issue of housing, we came up with the proposal of designing holistic housing. And this is a key aspect of our urban areas. We have to look at the land issues for low income especially, and have a mediation for evictions, provide decent resilient structures. And this is mostly for urban areas and also areas which are prone to other hazards such as flooding, and the use of local materials, which would enable people to own and construct houses using local materials that are easy to acquire, affordable for them, and easy to maintain, and provide quality infrastructure and public spaces. Had the issue of education and research, and here is intentionally investing in educating our children, the youth, and universities, and funding research, especially on green innovation, as well as having mentorship programs for young professionals and encouraging professionals who are already established and government to take in more students on internship programs. And then the notion of youth in resilience and really working with the youth. And I'm very happy that we had Chris on board earlier on, and he presented what they are doing as Combo Greens solutions. And really, we have to find a way to capitalize on the youth as a resource, have them to popularize urban resilience and sustainable practices, and really support the initiatives and new innovations. We also have to look at integrated planning and really entrenching all the components of sustainability and resilience, bringing in livelihood activities in resilience projects to ensure the balance between development vis-a-vis sustainability, integrating social, mental, and even spiritual elements in urban resilience, working with the people in planning, designing, and project implementation. Again, the con here is to work with the people, design with the people, plan with the people, and not for them. And the con here also is for the central and county governments to integrate resilient projects in their spatial and economic plans. There was also this, and I loved this so much, and I hope it's something that we can achieve, creation of a local sustainability index, where we work with local cities, towns, and municipalities to create a localized sustainability index with a reporting framework that can be used to rank our urban areas in terms of their sustainability practices. And this then can be rolled out as a pilot to other African cities. And this is very key because we find most of these things are provided at an international level. And usually we have no way of customizing and using them in our local scenario. So this is a very good suggestion that came on board that would hope would have some progress on making this local sustainability index. Finally, the message is very short: be smart, simplify. So without further ado, I would like to thank you very much and welcome architect Mohamed Munyanya. He holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from University of Nairobi. He was our chairman, our past chairman, before we went back to having presidents at the Architectural Association of Kenya. He's been a president in the East African Institute of Architects. He's been a treasurer of the African Union of Architects and East African Institute of Architects. He is a fellow member of the Architectural Association of Kenya. He's a registered architect and a director of Advest In-House Africa, AIA Architects. He loves to play, he loves to draw, he's very keen on research, and he loves sports such as football and rugby and exercising at the gym. So karibu sana Architect Munyanya, who will give us our closing remarks. Munyanya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Professional colleagues, I hope I can be heard well. With the internet, sometimes you cannot be sure whether you're being heard. And first, I want to thank the Architectural Association of Kenya for this awesome gathering. Indeed, it's a world's first. I see it in a lot of webinars globally, but given that we had an AAK convention virtually stroke in-house last week, I really want to commend the team at AAK. As you have been told, having served almost a decade ago, it shows the wisdom of handing over to very dynamic youth like Juliet, President Mugure Njendu, and many others, Florence Nyole, I can mention many, and obviously the past president, Emma Miloyo, who are all very eloquent and passionate about driving this agenda. I'm taking this effort to mention some of those key names because it's important to know that for every good progress, there is a team that is behind it. I also want to mention the academia. I can see Dr. Edwin Oyaro is there, Dr. Susan Kibue. Thank you so much for staying on course because we need a multi-pronged approach where we have the professionals and the academia to drive the agenda, especially the research component, which brings on board all the issues like the ones we've been discussing on urban resilience, design for multi-hazard resilient cities. The connection with the UN Habitat is very important. I'm so happy that they have always continued to recognize us. We did meet them when the UIA had a bureau meeting here. I think that is 2019 or 2018, because this year is almost gone and we don't really know what has happened this year. We met the UN Habitat and we actually have an active memorandum of understanding with the UN Habitat. The reason I mention this again is to say that we have a platform for engagement into which we can connect as a multilateral partner. We can connect all our issues and try to bring them to fruit. I am so happy that you have a summary. That was my main comment on the first day, that we need to have a summary of all the issues. And like past President Emma has said, we actually move from design, from presentations into action. And you have a program of action. This is very important. Let us walk it and let us try to implement it. I'm summarizing a bit and I'm going to hand over shortly to my colleague who's also connected, is Vice President UIA for region East of Europe, Nikos Fitikakis from Greece. So Nikos, when I'll call on you, please come on board and say a few remarks. My final remarks on this are the following. First of all, to thank the ministry. I've seen the Ministry for Environment is here, and basically welcome our thoughts one that is brought to you through the AAK and the academia, because that's now how we can make sure that we are not left behind. We don't want cities which evolve without thought. We have a lot of thoughts, we have a lot of ideas that don't get plugged into the decision making. But once we are given an open door, we basically bring all the issues and they're implemented. For example, now we have a sustainable urban rural, and actually I mean urban rural, not rural urban rural migration. Some individuals are finding it very difficult to survive in the urban centers because of the pandemic and other risks and challenges. So there's an element of urban rural. What is it saying, urban rural migration? It is saying that we also need to shift our thoughts to plan for those little settlements and towns so that we don't actually start following urban sprawls which go ahead of us. We need to basically make sure that we don't leave any little town behind. Otherwise, we'll end up with the slums in the small cities and urban sprawls. And finally, on the mega cities like Nairobi, the transport infrastructure which is coming up is important. Again, I really want to encourage that we pick all our ideas, which I know we have, our professionals and academia, and the government, which is with us here, try to listen to us and say, what are we looking at? For example, if you're talking of road transport, is it adequate without a sustainable mass transit? My theory or my thesis here is that it cannot be sustainable unless you have a functioning mass transit. And Dr. Susan Kiboya and Dr. Edwin Oyaro, I think, will bear me out. So what we are saying is that even as we are doing all this growth infrastructure, we must listen and say, fine, what else can we do so that we don't end up 15 years later redoing other multi-story transport infrastructure. But thank you so much, AK, for bringing our thoughts together. We can talk for long. This is a very nice event. May I, with your permission, allow Nikos Findikakis to say a few remarks. Nikos. Nikos, if you can say something.
Yes, thank you very much, Mohammed. I'm indeed proud to be hosted by you on this very important conference. Unfortunately, I have been informed few hours ago, so I can't say you more than a hello from UIA, from Athens, and from Acropolis. The problem that we face today, which is combined with the pandemic, is that we realized that although we have overcrowded urban areas, these overcrowded urban areas are fully isolated, fully abandoned, full of homeless people. So there is the so-called human relations between the citizens. This is lost. And as I wrote this morning to Mohammed, it always comes in my mind the famous peripatetic dialogues which were introduced by Aristotle in ancient Athens, by which it was a walk through the urban area, and they were arriving in the center, which was called Agora. Agora was incorporating all functions of the city, and people were there free to speak, free to have a democratic dialogue, which unfortunately is also lost it in our times. So further than smart cities, ecological cities, environmental cities, and the environment, we need to come back in our urban areas, the humans, the dialogues, the relations, which is affect directly architecture. And this should be for our next future, our dream for another architecture, a human architecture, a friendly to the dialogue and to the democracy. So Thank you for hosting me. I'm very glad to meet you. Thank you, Mohammed. You are a great, inspired member of UIA, and we hope to be always together. Thank you, friends from Kenya, which I visited 1.5 years ago, and I was indeed impressed. And I hope to be with you next time too. So thank you very much, and have a nice time, happy and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikos. And with that, first of all, just to thank you for finding little time to come and join us at a short notice. As you know, all of us who have gone through the School of Architecture and obviously even engineering, you know the Acropolis and the place it holds in the history of architecture and construction. It was destroyed almost sometimes back. We don't want to go to the politics, but what you're saying that sometimes is important to know that the political stability is important for our heritage. So as much as we are apolitical, we actually just need to basically make sure that we conserve our heritage by engaging positively. Thank you so much, and I hand you back to Juliet.
Thank you very much, Architect Munyanya. I wish to welcome our CEO, Jacob Mwangi, to give us a vote of thanks. And for those who are requesting for the proceedings, a report will also be compiled and will be available through the AAK website and other networks. Jacob, over to you.
I'll be doing the vote of thanks on behalf of the CEO.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Yes, this is James. I'm in charge of research and advocacy at AAK. So first is, of course, to wish all our participants and really just to appreciate their sacrifice and ability to join us. Then I'd also wish to thank the UN Habitat through their affiliate, the World Urban Campaign, who've really stepped up and initiated the whole conversations around resilient cities through the Urban Thinkers Campus series. Then, of course, our partners in organizing the Urban Thinkers Campus. First is the UIA and ISOCAP, as well as IFLA Africa. We had their presidents gracing our opening sessions. We wish to really convey our sincere gratitude to them. We also want to thank the Ministry of Environment. We've had Dr. Ayub Masharia representing the CS. We've also gotten great insights from him. Then, of course, we also want to thank and recognize our international participants who've really been keen on joining us despite the time differences and the geographical differences. We also want to thank and very much wish to extend our gratification to our panelists from as far as Sweden. We also had speakers from other organizations we've worked with previously, John from KDI, Marco Jal from UN Habitat, Dr. Susan Kibwe from JCOT, Dr. Edwin Oyaro, who is here with us from the University of Nairobi. So really just to thank you and extend our gratitude once more for sacrificing your time and really sharing your knowledge with us. I also wish to thank our President, Mugure Njendu. Of course, she's really been in the background trying to help us and guide us throughout the session. And of course, to our host, the convener, Planner Juliet Rita. Thank you very much for making this possible. Also in the background were the governing council of the AAK from the Architects Chair Chapter, Florence Nyole. We also have the AAK Floods Response Chair. He's with us, Architect George Arabu. And then finally, to thank the AAK Secretariat, led by Christine and Lina, as well as the CEO, just for their support and really just guiding the Town Planners Chapter in preparing for the Thinkers Campus. Otherwise, that is all for me, and we will be sharing the recordings and really a summary of the proceedings from the sessions through our various social media platforms. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.